Welcome, everyone. Welcome to all of you who are following us on the webinar, all of you who are following us on Facebook Live, to another presentation of PBBI, the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute at California State University, Fresno. This is a very special event for us as we've partnered with the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, and the Tegas Press. Thank you to Professor Mario Pereira for this opportunity. We are happy to be here for many reasons, and one of them is we have a very an outstanding panel of people who I've known and admired for some for many years, others for a less amount of time, and so I would like to introduce our panel to you as we are going to have our first at the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute's book launch that is virtual. We were planning on having several book launches throughout a couple of at least each semester. However, everything is now virtual, and of course at the California State University, Fresno, is with all the CSUs, UCs, and community colleges, and most of the public schools, everything is virtual for this semester and for the spring semester as well. So welcome to each and every one of you. Those following us on the webinar, please remember that you can go ahead and ask any questions, and we'll try to answer them for you. When it comes to the book presentation, we are launching a book that is from a very good friend of ours, of lots of, we all know her, and a very good friend who I met in actually 1989, when her and my best friend since I was in high school, Humberto Freitas, actually took a trip across the United States and then across the Atlantic, and lived in Ponta Delgada after that, after 1990. We here in Tulare, or the community I live, which is south of Fresno, we launched a symposium that we had for 12 years between 1990 and 2002 called Filaments of the Atlantic Heritage. And the first symposium was with the author that we are going to talk about today. Adelaide Freitas was one of the three authors at the symposium: Adelaide Freitas, Alamo Oliveira, and Humberto Freitas. And then I had myself and the president of the Portuguese Cultural Center, and then we had two people in the audience. So it was a very big symposium. But from that, it grew to a very large event that author and good friend Katherine Vaz participated, and saw how it really flourished to an event much different 6-7 years after that. And so I'm very happy to have all of you here. We're going to launch the book Smelling the Darkness, that was translated by Katherine, Emanuel, and a couple other translators to English, published by the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, the Tegas Press. And so I figured we would just talk a little bit about Adelaide, very informal, about the book, about your experiences with the book. We're very fortunate to have two authors who have read Adelaide, and we'll start with Katherine, if she doesn't mind. Katherine Vaz is quite well known. I don't think she needs an introduction, but for those of you who don't know, Katherine is a widely published author, and has some of my favorite books, such as Saudade, such as Mariana, such as Fado and Other Stories, such as Lady of the Artichokes and Other Portuguese American Stories, and others. And Katherine, actually, when I did my master thesis, one of her stories, The Hunt for King Sebastian, was part of my master thesis, because it was focusing on the ethnic role of or ethnic literature in the Portuguese and in the American idiosyncrasy, and how how you cannot be American without having some trace, some ethnicity somewhere. So we'll start with Katherine. Welcome. So nice to see you. And obviously, ladies first.
Well, thank you very, very much, Denise. And hello to all my colleagues. It's really lovely to be here. And this is a very special lanzamento, because I think maybe not all your listeners would know that Adelaide Batista Freitas died about 2 years ago. And so this is, because we all were friends with her, something of a mournful but good occasion. I wish she could be looking down and hearing us praising her work. I read this book with a kind of an astonishment because it really is, as close as I can describe it, like a howl of a novel. It's like a scream in a way to me. And in particular, it's a very female scream. And I'm going to talk for maybe 10 minutes about some of my reactions to things in the book. It's like a cross to me between Midnight's Children and Tin Drum. But as Denise very kindly said, I've written a lot of stories about my Azorean background. My father and his family were from Terceira, but I myself was not an immigrant. I was born and raised in California. And Smiling in the Darkness is a chance for readers to flip all those equations and get a woman's voice who was in an immigrant culture, but in the Azores. And I think that Shauna is the main character who, with this wonderful sensory explosion of a book and this kind of color intensity, it's about being abandoned. Shauna's mother had a very painful birth and left her almost immediately, went in this kind of Moby Dick style pursuit of the great white whale of American dream and fortune. And so this little girl is left in the Azores with her beloved Vava. But there's a waiting. And I think American literature, especially nowadays, is very fond of showing children as empowered or bright or smart. But what I loved about this book and Shauna in São Bento in the Azores is that she's at war with the world. And children are not really that powerful. They aren't. They are dependent on adults. They are trying to figure out what world this is. So she is swallowed in this world of plane crashes and earthquakes and rats coming out of, there's a kind of magical reel, rats exploding out of pulpits sort of feeling. There's this later in the book, attention paid to menstruation and the agony and physical pain of it. There's a physicality to this book that in a way makes me truly have saudades and miss my friend Adelaide, who would sit around and laugh with me. She and Vamberto were some of the first to write about my own work. And I remember in particular, Adelaide and I talking about seeing the world in color. I wrote about that in Saudade, but this book really revels in it also. The book does progress, and there's this pregnant feeling of waiting for the mother to return. She finally does, but she's got this ogress in tow named Rosalia, who's this monster. I mean, there's the crone and the monster. There's mythological elements in the book that are quite remarkable. And she's abandoned again in a way when her mother returns and pretty much ignores her. There's a triumph at the end, finally, that's very bittersweet. And I'll leave it to the readers to find it because I don't want to give away what that is. But I thought what I would do is just read a very, very short passage, 2 paragraphs only, of some of the things that show how beautiful the writing is in this book. There are these explosions. There's a tension here that's really quite remarkable. And it's like feeling trapped in a very particular female body that is powerful and strong, and it's like a shriek, but she's stuck. She describes at one point a pearl white butterfly alighting on the brim of her grandmother's hat, and the agitation of the sea in Vava's head startled it, meaning the butterfly, which is just beautiful. And that gives you a little bit of the flavor of the book. The sea foam is like the laundry soap of mermaids. So it's this very lush book. Carolina is a wonderful character who's, I can't blame her for being, she's sort of evil. She's sort of there. They have real fights. You kind of hold your breath when you're reading it. But I just want to read this beautiful, very short paragraph that really celebrates to me the book. Shana, which is spelled Xana, is angry at the failure of cameras. They would say, you know, watch the birdie and there's no birdie. She doesn't want her pictures taken. She's angry about cameras. But her beloved uncle shows up. Her mother's brother shows up and she just adores him. And it's one of the few deep connections she makes for most of the book. And she refuses to have him take her picture. She doesn't want her mother to see it. So she makes a scene. And afterwards, Uncle Joe took his niece by the hand, and they both sat down on the low backyard wall. Little by little, Shauna began drawing closer to the camera and looked at it countless times to see if she could spot the cursed birdie that never seemed to appear. Her uncle took advantage of the opportunity to prepare once more to snap another photograph. "No, Uncle Joe," Shauna squealed, ready to bolt again. But since she was very fond of her uncle, she lay her head in his lap and without looking at him said, "When you come back to Sombantu, why don't you buy me a camera that's a lot better than the one with the birdies? Instead of that line camera, what I'd like is one that's able to photograph people's hearts outside their bodies. If you bring me one of those, I'll let you take as many pictures of me as you wish. Not just one or two, but as many as you want, okay?" Uncle Joe stood up. There was nothing anyone could do with this little girl, he thought in disappointment. But they sat back down and stayed a little while. Shauna watched his movements. She drew even nearer to him and squeezed his hand, which was burning with a cold sweat. She squeezed and squeezed it to see if the two of them stuck together. All of a sudden, her uncle made a tender, unexpected gesture, brushing his hand over his niece's face, as if to photograph the feelings of a strong little girl housed inside a body of porcelain. That kind of captures, I think, the beauty of Adelaide's writing and the passion she claims, the bodily feelings of being a girl in the Azores. I've never read anything like it. And I just think it's just a marvel. It makes me miss my friend so much. And I picture her. I was at the University of the Azores briefly once, and I remember her coming over and bringing me my laundry at one point, and what joy she had, and what a fierce love of the Azores in literature too. So this is for you, Adelaide. Thank you.
She would love it. I'm sure she did love it. And I know she had a very, very special friendship for you because she spoke of you highly, not only in public places, obviously, but also in friends when we would get together in San Miguel. And one of my fondest memories is having coffee with her when Vambert would go outside to smoke. At that time, you couldn't smoke inside already, and Adelaide and I would talk for long time, and she was indeed a special lady. Thank you so much, Catherine. That was beautiful. We'll pass the torch to another writer, Anthony Barcelos, whose novel "Land of Milk and Money" should be read by every single Portuguese American, and not only every single Portuguese American, but Canadian American and other people who like literature and like a wonderful story. But especially those here in California who can certainly relate to "Land of Milk and Money" in many ways. Anthony has written about the novel, about the translation of the novel, and we're so happy that he took some time to be with us this evening as well. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you, Denise. Unlike the other people on the panel, I come to Adelaide's work late, but I was also there before because I was friends with Vambert in 8th grade. We go way back. And in those days, I still remember this very distinctly when the 8th grade teacher came over to me and Mr. Snow had Vambert by the arm and led him over to me. And he said, "Tony, Vamberto doesn't speak English, but you speak Portuguese." And I said, "Well, a little. I speak it at home. It's my first language, even though today it seldom gets any exercise." And so Vambert and I sat side by side in 8th grade so I could keep him up to date on what was going on. I was a translator for him. And years later, I find out that he's become a man of letters and a professor of literature at the University of the Azores. And it's this connection more than any other that got me involved with the translation by providing a blurb for the back of the book, which Mario asked me about, and I was very happy to do because of my friendship with Van Bert, my admiration for him, and what I had heard about Adelaide. I wanted to help out. Now, of course, unlike Katherine, I am a narrowly published author. Most of my work, I'm a math professor, and most of the things I've published have been like in textbook or pedagogical manuals. And I have that one novel that Denij loves to promote, and I love having him promote it because he's very enthusiastic about it. But that's my one claim to fame. I grew up in a Portuguese-speaking family in the center of California. So I am a Portuguese-American writer with one novel to my credit and a book blurb, which I will now read for the novel Smiling in the Darkness. Many people of Portuguese descent take pride in claiming that the word saudade is untranslatable. In reality, we come close with a melding of bittersweet nostalgia, bone-deep longing, and an endless yearning for what one can never have again, or indeed may never have had. Adelaide Freitas dipped her pen in saudade to tell of family separation and bonds that never loosen. In her authentic Azorean voice, she recounts the immigrant experience and centrifugal impulses that force people apart in spite of their desperation to cling to one another. In their sensitive rendering, the translators have captured the nuances of Freitas's novel, Smiling in the Darkness, with special care for those who have her native language in their heritage and heartfelt saudade for its loss. And Van Bert and I talked about it, and he thanked me for it, and it gave me great pleasure to do this on behalf of his late wife and in the promotion of her excellent novel.
Thank you, Anthony, and I promote your book as everyone should, because it's a good book. So if you have not read it, do it. And we're not launching a Land of Milk and Money again today, but we actually need to come back to and revisit it. I'd like to pass the torch now to one of the co-translators. So the book was translated by Catherine Baker, Bobby Chamberlain, Reinaldo Silva, and Emanuel Melo. There's a foreword by João de Melo, a very well-known Azorean author who lives in mainland Portugal, who himself has a few of his books translated to English. One of them by Habassa, which is an achievement and a half to have a novel translated by by Habassa. And so his books, João is, as all of you know who know his works, an excellent writer. His latest book is just phenomenal. And I should to be completely transparent, Kathy Baker and I worked on another novel before, which was, that's how I got to know Kathy, Já Não Gosto de Chocolates, I No Longer Like Chocolates by Alma Oliveira. And she actually was looking at other things to work on. And as she mentions in a note that she writes at the end of the translation, I sent her a copy of Adelaide's book, and she took it on. And she took it on with a group of translators and did a fine job. Unfortunately, Kathy could not. She doesn't do this kind of technology, and good for her, because we get caught in doing it from morning to night. We have Emanuel Melo from Canada, from Toronto, who worked on the translation of Smiling in the Darkness with Catherine, with Bobby Chamberlain and Reinaldo Silva. And Emanuel, if you would like to take a few minutes, we'd love to have you tell us a little about how you came to the translation of Smiling in the Darkness and your experience in translating this as being one of the co-translators with Kathy and the other two gentlemen.
Thank you. I would love to do that. First of all, it's wonderful to be in California, even though I'm not in California right now. But thanks to Zoom, we are everywhere. 4 translators for one novel is kind of daunting. But, you know, if we think about what Katherine Vaz just said about Adelaide, this is a formidable Azorean writer. And I guess it took a team of people to actually get the work into English. So I am very, very deeply honored to be associated with the translation project. And I'm also thrilled that Mario Pereira's team at Tegas accepted one of my photographs for the book cover. So my connection to the book is also through the cover, and that's very meaningful to me. My introduction to Adelaide Freitas actually happened many years before, while I was visiting Ponta Delgada in São Miguel Açores. We all know where that is. And I was browsing through books to bring back to Toronto, books from Gilles. If anyone knows Gilles, it was a beautiful bookstore, now gone. And I came across a book called Nas Duas Margens, de Literatura Norte-Americana e Açoriana, which is a wonderful book of essays that includes Adelaide's masterful dissertation on Moby Dick. Alas, I had not seen Sorriso por Dentro da Noite on the shelves, because if I had, of course, I would have bought it. So this is for all of you, anyone out there. I don't have the Portuguese book with me, and I would love to have a copy for my collection. So if anyone has a copy and they're willing to pass it on, you can reach me through my website. It's thetorzorian.com, or on Twitter through Torzorian. Torzorian is a mixture of Torontonian, Azorean writer. So I fell in love with Adelaide's writing, and I even wrote about her on my blog in my July 28th post called Adelaide Freitas from the Azores to North America, which was when she passed away. By that time, I had already met Catherine F. Baker, this amazing woman that I enjoyed working with. And she assumed rightly that I would be interested in Sorriso, because the story of Shana, the 12-year-old protagonist in Adelaide Freitas' heartbreaking account of what it means for a child to experience the fracture of family ties, was really important. One of the strongest themes in the novel for me is the idea that you can't ever really go back and recapture the past, and that the present is not always a better place. The damage has been done. There's a lot of damage that happens in the story to Shana. And I related to Shana because I too experienced the tearing apart of being taken from one culture to another, from losing beloved family members through immigration, and the ultimate realization that something deep within the soul gets damaged or changed with that process. The ending of the novel has Shana clinging desperately to hold on to her world just as it is about to change forever. It's a profound moment that captured my own moment of leaving the island of San Miguel for Canada at the age of 9. And while my life has been mostly lived in English, I miraculously maintained an intuitive feeling or soul understanding of my maternal language over the years, although at times it feels like a distant memory too. So this is the background I had. And so when Sorriso, for me, when I read it, it was a very emotional read. Although Katie Baker is a very competent and careful translator, she only learned Portuguese in her mid-50s. I mean, that's incredible that a woman who discovers her Azorean ancestry in her 50s picks up the language and not just learns to say bon dia, but she actually goes and seeks out to translate like tough Azorean, literature. So she's amazing, and I really owe a great debt of gratitude to her for bringing me into the project. as we all do, for her championing of Azorean writing. So she had done a meticulous job, and her other co-translators, but when I read it, I felt that the translation still needed some wordsmithing to capture more deeply the nuance, the richness and texture of Adelaide's lyrical writing. And so I tried to make some polite suggestions to Katie as to where to change a word here, a phrase there. And to my surprise and delight, she was open to my suggestions and invited me to collaborate fully on the final draft of the translation. We did this, of course, through, she's in the States, I'm in Canada. Thank God for technology. We were able to work together through email, and it was great. So I had the text side by side, the Portuguese and the English. And so my job was to read both sides and see if it made sense. I suppose the first attempt at any translation is to try and get the words, the sentence structure, the syntax, the equivalents down on paper as much as possible. It's like jigsaw puzzle pieces all in front of you. Some pieces are hard to make fit, while others are so self-evident that they lull the translator into a false sense of getting it right. It's also like seeing a painting in front of you with all the color foundation, but still in need of some additional brush strokes, some smudging maybe, or even small additions of color to fill out the complexity of the image. So that's where I came in at this very final stage after the groundwork had already been done. When we completed the translation, all that was missing was its English title. Sorriso por dentro da noite is one of those phrases that is very hard to find the real equivalent in English, but we finally settled on smiling in the darkness. I think it's a fine equivalent, but for me, a native Portuguese speaker, the Portuguese contains a richness and a nuance that I can't really explain or translate. I can only experience it through a feeling in my most inner self. This is the challenge of all translation. It's not just words, it's a culture, a people, a geographical landscape. It's everything to do with how we identify and belong in the physical world, but put down into words. Given the beauty of Adelaide's writing, so drenched in local language, so poetic in its prose, it was indeed a challenge to get the translation right as much as possible without losing the lyricism of the book. I think we have done justice to Adelaide's novel, and I hope it will please those who will read it in English, that it will help them enter Adelaide's world, to see it, to touch it, to taste it. In translation, yes, but still connecting with the essence of the original. I once wrote a reflection called Being Through Words, which I invite you to read on my blog posting. It's from March 2018. And it's also been recently published in just for those of you who are interested in these things, there's a new anthology called Antologia Literária Saturnia Autores Luso-Canadianos. It's available as a PDF because of the pandemic. And you can get the links from our website. So I think I keep talking about my website because one thing Katie Baker taught me is self-promotion. This is what this lovely woman did to me. She says, Emanuel, you got to do it. So thank you, Katie. So in my reflection on the meaning of translation of not only words, but of the self through words, I ended that reflection with a poem, which I'd like to end here, if I may, by Avelina de Silveira, who's a visual artist and poet born in Angola, but who lives in both the Azores and Canada. When I first read her poem, Palavras onde me perco, words where I lose myself, I guess, it was like having a knife stabbing to the heart experience, especially the line, Já não sonho em português. I no longer dream in Portuguese. This is the painful moment I had experienced through immigration, when eventually my mother language receded to make room for the new language of the country that became home. And this, I suspect, would be something that Shauna would experience eventually, and that Adelaide would be conscious of in her own reflections of language and identity. I think this poem, for me at least, captures the heart of smiling in the darkness. And so I'd like to finish off by just quickly reading it and then I'll be done. The poem is written in Portuguese, English, and French. I don't know if any of you speak French, but if you don't, c'est dommage. But I think listening to the poem itself and this melange of languages and identity is I think, powerful. So it's called Palavras onde me perco. How I long for the days when words were essential. Outros tempos, quando a palavra encerrava uma certeza existencial. Cœur et mot, moi-même in a fabric of being. Foi há tanto tempo que parti. As palavras custam a vir. Como se eu as quisesse articular, mas houvesse uma pedra na garganta. A voz lusitânia escorre sem que dela eu beba. Quase alien, porque já não sonho em português. Palavras, words, mots perdus, labirintos de imagens onde me perco na ânsia de chegar à outra margem de mim. J'ai changé le profil du jour et j'ai perdu mon visage en ces temps. Never again myself between the sea and the maples. Oh, tragédia de emigrar, de partir sem chegar, tecendo na diáspora être ici et de toujours. Demain sera un autre pays, un autre matin, de identidade dispersa. I'll be searching in yesterday for the name of a water bird among the snow. Thank you.
Thank you. And a lovely way to end it with Evelina's work, which is magnificent. Thank you so much, Emanuel, and thank you for your work on the novel with Kathy and with the rest of the team. We will turn now to Professor Mario Pereira, who is from University of Massachusetts Dartmouth and who is the editor of this collection. Thank you, Mario, for allowing us to do this joint venture with Massachusetts. And we hope that when we go beyond pandemic, that we can do these things live. And so, Emanuel, we need to get you to California. And of course, we need to get Katherine back to California. It's been a very long time since she's here, and she has lots of readers and throughout, especially the central San Joaquin Valley. And Anthony's just a couple hours away here in California. Anthony from Fresno is only about 3 hours, and that's just a short drive in California, right, Anthony?
Absolutely.
So,
Copy of Sadat for Katherine to autograph.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. And so we'd like to bring on Professor Mario Pereira. Again, thank you for this opportunity. And we'll talk a little bit about this project, but as all the other books that have been or will be published. He is executive director of this series at Tegus, along with my good friend, I think he was on as an attendee, Onesimo Almeida, Professor Onesimo Almeida, the writer, the intellectual, the university teacher, the wonderful storyteller, I'm not going to say one, but probably the best storyteller in the Portuguese language and beyond. And so, Mario, thank you again for this opportunity and a little bit about this project and all of the other projects that are involved in this series of translating Azorean authors and publishing them here in the States.
Thank you so much for having me and for hosting this event. It's really wonderful. I don't want to take up too much time. You know, as an editor, I feel my role is to be unseen. That's a successful editor. But really, I just want to express gratitude to you for doing this, to all the participants and panelists here and everyone in the audience. This is why we go through this and we publish books like these, to make an impact in people's lives. And this book was published when the country went into lockdown, and poor Kathy Baker couldn't even open the box for several weeks. I think it sat on her porch. So we're thrilled to be able to do something here now with you, and I hope we can continue to collaborate in the future. I sort of see you as the perfect West Coast sort of counterpart home for this series and these kinds of events. And I'm grateful to you for suggesting this book to Kathy in the first place. My first encounter with the novel was when I started at the Center for Portuguese Studies, and I found it on the shelf, and I would leaf through it and read it. It was a very complex, difficult novel. And, as an editor, you think of books I'd like to do one day. Wouldn't this be fabulous? And you have lots of things to consider and think about, and who would translate it, and how do we go about it? And then one day in my inbox, Kathy's translation arrives. So it was just perfect for me. And I have to admit to Emanuel here, when something comes in translated by 3, 4, 5 people, you get a little scared initially, but it turned out not to be the case. So I was thrilled for that. But I also want to thank Vamberto, who's been nothing but supportive throughout the process, has let the editing take its course, and he's really just been a great support. I'm grateful to Kathy for, as everyone has said, being a champion of Azorean literature, being a champion of this book. And we will be, I'll say in a minute, working with Emanuel and Kathy on another project right now, which we're very happy about. And again, Katherine Vaz wrote the original blurb to the Portuguese edition, and Tony, you wrote the blurb to our edition, and Emanuel, not only did you translate, but you also provided the cover photo. So this is just a wonderful panel for me to be on now. And one thing I will say about the series before getting into details is we have a partnership with Letras Levadas, a publisher in the Azores, and they do their own design, and they publish, print, sell, distribute in the Azores and Portugal all of the books in this series. Unfortunately, because of the mail system is slowed down with COVID, I haven't yet received the copy of the novel that they have published for us, but it should be here soon. And hopefully, when people start to travel again, and people who wouldn't otherwise be aware of this novel, you go to the Azores, you go to bookstores and shops, they can stumble upon it and discover it. But one thing I'll say to Emanuel especially is they have reissued the novel in Portuguese, so it is available. And I do hope people read both the English and the Portuguese, because the translation is, it's an amazing feat that you guys were able to accomplish, because the novel, as we've heard, is not simply complex and layered in terms of emotion and psychology and character, but the descriptions of landscape and the way it's used to create mood, and it's so symbolic, and then just the lyricism and density of the language itself. The translators have a difficult job working on so many different levels to be able to convey what the novel sets out to do in the original Portuguese. It's a very, very difficult task. But anyway, I'll get back to the series just to say that when the idea for the series came up and I contacted Onesmo and we met and had lunch, he's been nothing but supportive. As you all know, he's an amazing colleague, and the series wouldn't be where it is without him and his support and obvious input. And I also want to thank the government of the Azores, who has, in the spring, they gave us a 3-year grant to help support the series and keep it going, which we're grateful for as well. So I'll just say quickly, the first book that we published in the series was a translation of Vitorino Nemesio's Mal Tempo no Canal, translated as Stormy Isles, by Francisco Calda Fagundes. which was originally published by Gavier Brown in the 90s. And another thing that Nesmo has contributed is we've created not just a personal, professional relationship or partnership, but also on an institutional level. That book, the first 2 books we published are co-publications with Gavier Brown, and we'll continue to do that. And so not only do we commission new works of new translations, but we also sort of reissue classic translations. And this was one of the examples of Stormy Isles. And I hope you guys are able to do something with Coda Fagundes and launch this book. I know we had initially intended to last year and things fell apart. You know, it's one of the most important Azorean novels and one of the most important novels in Portuguese in the 20th century. And Francisco Coda Fagundes had, you know, over 20 years of corrections, of, you know, rephrasings, improvements to the text. And so when we told him we wanted to reissue it, he almost retranslated the entire thing. I mean, I think the Word files had long since gone missing. And so he basically did retranslate it, which is amazing. And his introduction is very substantial, not only to the book, but to Nemesio as a writer and to the idea of, you know, Azorean literature, Azoreanity. And then the next book we published in the series, and this is 2 books in the fall of 2019, was a bilingual edition of the poetry of Pedro da Silveira, a poet from Flores. And we would like to do more bilingual editions. I think that's an important for publishing in the US, because some people do have a command of Portuguese, but not well enough, or they're not comfortable enough reading poetry or literature or scholarship. And I think this is a way to help, you know, improve people's, not just their language skills, but their comfort level at this level. But that edition of Silveira's poetry helps encapsulate what we can accomplish and what we're trying to do, because it was mentioned in the New York Times as recommended as one of the books and translations to be read in 2019. And it was actually longlisted for a PEN Poetry Award, you know, which is astonishing for us as a small press, but also for an Azorean poet who wouldn't necessarily be seen in Portugal as a major Portuguese poet. And so it just shows, if we can get these into American audiences, what we can accomplish and the types of recognition that Azorean writers can get here in the US. And then last spring, you know, when COVID hit, we published Adelaide's novel, and then David Brookshaw's translation of the classic work of travel literature, Raoul Brandau's The Unknown Islands. And that was the first book that got support from the government of the Azores. And so we're very lucky for that. And we hope to launch that soon with Nesmo and David Brookshaw. And then this year we have 2 more books planned. We plan to do 2 books a year. And we'll have, again, Kathy Baker and Emanuel have translated another book for us in the series. And it's Natalia Correa's, I think we've translated it in America, I Discovered I Was European, which turns out, coming back and reading it in 2020, is far more complex than I initially, you know, struck me as. We learned so much about her as a person, as a writer. We learned a lot about the US in the 1950s, and lots of troublesome and complex and interesting observations. And then our final novel this year will be another sort of revised translation of Dark Stones by Diaz de Mello, translated by Gregory McNabb, who's gone over it and revised it. And we'll have an introduction by Maria Joao Dodman in Toronto. So again, trying to spread out throughout the community and get more people in Canada involved. So just thank you, everyone. It's very moving and humbling to see you all here participating in this tonight.
Thank you, Mario. And of course, with any book launching, we have to, you know, launch the book and actually find, you know, tell people where they need to purchase it. I assume everything can be done online, right? Tegus is through Amazon, or
Right.
we always we always promote, you know, the same company, but it's one of the outlets that everybody uses. So one of the good things about, of course, Tegus Press is that their books are available directly online. Correct, Mario?
Yes. Yeah, Amazon.com or UMassPress.com. Yeah.
Okay. So if you haven't, I know that a lot of the people that are attendees, those who are following us on social media, we've had a fantastic response on social media, over 350 views so far. But those of you who are on the webinar, I think most of you have already, other than some of the students, and I thank them also for attending, have probably read the novel or have access to it. If you haven't, please do so. Because one of the things, as Mario mentioned, one of the things that's important about these publications is we need to get them out, and that's always a big important part of, not just printing them, but how do we get them to the readers? How do we get them to readers in the American, in the Canadian world? How do we get them to North America, to those readers of the English language who may be of Portuguese background, or also who are not but like to read a good book? And so I think through Amazon, that's one way to get that out. So we need to work together and promote as much as we can. Again, congrats, Mario, and thanks so much for your work on that. Thanks to Onesimo, who's still on. And so as an attendee, there's what it looks like. Anthony, show it to us. Tell us a couple of words so we can get you on as a speaker view.
This is the cover, which is based on Emanuel's photograph, and the blurb on the back includes notes about the author and Kathy Baker, the lead translator. And so this is what you're looking for.
Thank you, Anthony. And all of the attendees, if I started listing names, and I don't want to leave anybody behind, but I think we could have had just put them all on the Zoom as panelists, and we could have had a complete symposium of Portuguese American writers and Portuguese American professors throughout the United States. We have people from Canada, such as Manuel Melo. We have a little while ago, Mario mentioned Francisco Cota Fagundes, who is on, a very dear friend, and we, as soon as this pandemic is over, that is the first person we want to get to Fresno State, because Francisco has, as many of you know, a strong connection to the Valley. He's written about it, and he relates a lot to our to the audience here in the Central Valley. Just a little bit of a story. His autobiography, which I would highly recommend, Hard Knocks, is wonderful. And when he first wrote it, and when he had it just as a manuscript before it was published, I had him at the time I was teaching at Tulare Union High School, and I had him read part of it to the class. And it's not an easy book, and they were mostly sophomores and juniors. And for those of you who know anything about high school, sophomores don't really want to know much about literature most of the time. But for 2 years, those students talked to me constantly about Francisco Cota Fagundes and about that book, and most of them actually read it when it was printed. So he's on as an attendee, and so I want to give a big shout out to Francisco Cota Fagundes and many others who are on there, including one of our favorite writers as well, Frank Gaspar. And so a big shout out to Frank Gaspar as well. We're coming upon the end, and so I want to thank all of you for participating. There aren't any basic questions. There's lots of kind words from everyone of the attendees. And we thank you. And actually, someone was just saying, Hard Knocks is a great book. It is a great book. So excited to hear of the future projects, Mario, because Natalia Correa's book, I just reread it myself in Portuguese, not for any other reason, just out of pleasure. And some of the themes that Natalia touched upon, and I'm sure Emanuel has found this in his translation in the 1950s, are still so relevant today in today's America. It's kind of scary sometimes. So it's wonderful that that book is being published soon. So again, if there are any final thoughts from any of you, if you'd like to share, please do. Katherine, thanks so much. I appreciate your time, and as a matter of fact, those of you who like literature and who like the Portuguese American creativity, we're going to have a special panel on the 17th that Katherine will be part of. It will be in the morning. It'll be at 11 o'clock our time, 2 o'clock Eastern time. And I'll be sending you some emails about that. It's actually a very special event that we look forward to presenting here on the 17th. Katherine?
No, I'm looking at just, it's a real joy to celebrate Azorean literature. And in particular, as I said, just that it is a wonderful, wonderful book from my friend. It's like an immersion. I would describe the book as not just a reading experience, but as an immersion. So I would really recommend reading it. I thought the translation was beautiful. I read it in Portuguese 20 years ago, maybe. I'm not even remembering how long ago it was. But I felt like there was something about the music of the language in Portuguese that was immense. And the translation really captured this, the volume of the writing, which was really spectacular. But it's so wonderful. I guess the nice thing about Zoom is I get to be in, everyone's got a bookcase behind, which is, I guess we've all learned to do that. But it's good to see, you know, all my friends here, and I guess the ones who are attending too. So just thanks for listening. And this is Adelaide, this one's for you.
Indeed, Adelaide. We all think the world of you still. You're still with us. I think she'll be with us forever. She was she was an excellent writer, an excellent professor. I don't think there's ever a student that didn't enjoy her classes. And she was also, as many of you know, part of the Azorean government. She was actually one of the first women part of the PSD political party in the Azores, as far as holding a seat in regional government and holding a seat in their central committee. Adelaide was director of the Instituto de Ação Social, which is kind of what we might call here the social services for the Azores, and they couldn't have found a better champion for those in need than Adelaide Freitas, or Adelaide Batista Freitas, as we all know her. So thanks to all of you. I'd like to close with asking our good friend, the interim associate dean for the College of Arts and Humanities, who's joined us this evening, and that is Professor Sergio La Porta, to kind of give some final thoughts. And thank you so much, Sergio, for joining us. We appreciate it. Thanks to the College of Arts and Humanities, who is always present, whether it be Sergio or Dean Nora Chapman. And so he will have the last word.
Oh, thank you, Denise, and thank you to all the panelists for bringing us this wonderful work of literature. I unfortunately don't read Portuguese, and I do translate from other languages, so I realize how difficult a process it is. And this is a really handsome looking volume, and your discussion has really, I'm sure, stimulated a lot of people to rush out and get it so that they can read it in English. And I'd also like to thank Denise for his work with the Institute for Portuguese Beyond Borders. The Azorean community in particular is a vital part of the Valley. You may know the population here is large, and this wonderful evening brought together people from the Central Valley and the East Coast, as well as abroad. But Denisha's work here at Fresno State, the preeminent institution for the humanities in the Central Valley, is invaluable, and really spreading the word about the contribution of the Portuguese and the Azorean community in particular to the culture of the Valley, the hard work they did as immigrants in farming the Valley, and then subsequently in all walks of life in every sort of area, from television to the arts and business. And so we're grateful to Denise for all of his tireless work. He works, I don't think there's an hour of the day when he's not working. And so we're very grateful. We're grateful for to all of you for your participation this evening. And we're looking forward to many more events such as this that will help enlighten us to the greatness that is Portuguese literature.
Thank you so much, interim team. Thank you so much, Sergio, for your kind words. I appreciate that. And thanks to our sponsor, FLAT, Luz American Development Foundation, who is an important part of what we do at Fresno State. The Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute, as Dr. Sergio La Porta mentioned, is a collaborative work between three different colleges: the College of Arts and Humanities, College of Social Science, and of course the Jordan College of Agricultural Science and Technology. And it's kind of a unique project because it brings offerings in these three different. It's an interdisciplinary unit, and but the College of Arts and Humanities has plays a very important part, of course, because that's where we have our Portuguese studies program, and that is coordinated by Professor Inês Lima, whose PhD was done at University of Massachusetts Dartmouth. So thank you all again. Have a wonderful evening. To my dear friends on the panel, and of course the interim dean, thank you all. And thanks to all of those wonderful attendees. Thanks for all the nice comments. Thanks for all of you who are joining us from Canada to the East Coast, and those of you who are following us on social media as well. We will be back on the 17th with another event. We have actually 3 events next week, 17th, 18th, and 19th. And so be in tune to all the different events that we have between now and the end of the semester. I had a friend of mine tell me that PBBI has more events lined up than storms that will be hitting California in the next few months. And that's probably right, because we don't have enough water, unfortunately. So thank you all. Have a wonderful evening. And as Katherine said, I think the best way to end this is for you, Adelaide. We love you. Good night.
Bueno,
Good night.
bueno,
Boa noite.
thank you.
Thank you. Boa noite.